Lapse the steering wheel here. Give me the steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on! Whoa!
Your leg, mate, please. Your leg.
How the f*** is this possible?
I'm driving like a grandma.
Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me?
Proper radio, the rest of the race.
Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him.
We've got a lunatic on the track down that interstate.
I am so annoyed.
Hello and welcome back into the portray for podcast number 875. Well, this is Todd, believe it or not.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, for your kind consideration, we are going to offer our big, really, I guess it's kind of a big season preview, maybe unresearched and untethered season review. That's what we're going to do. But before doing that, I have to introduce my guest. You know what we do when we talk about all these racing and races and race reviews and preseason. Oh, you know who I invite.
Rick from out of the wasteland. He's bad. He's beautiful. He's crazy. It's...
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
So, Paul, I got to tell you right up front, you just got back from Bathurst, where the Heart of Racing went down there and raced.
Yes.
But
Australia.
Yes. And all of our, everybody, all our listeners know how much you and I love Australians.
I love it even more now.
Yeah, I bet you do. Yeah. So you were down there at Bathurst, but I did appreciate the pictures you sent of you where you were dressed up like the guy in the Assless Chaps from Road Warrior. You know, you're down there. It was either that or the gyrocopter pilot. I couldn't tell which one.
Speaking about ripped from the wasteland. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Direct from the wasteland. You know, you were in the Thunderdome down there, weren't you?
Yeah, we were in a Thunderdome, actually. It was quite a Thunderdome. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Something else.
So how was the race? How was Bathurst?
Bathurst, yeah, it was, I mean, I just enjoyed the heck out of Australia, honestly. Bathurst was interesting. I mean, the track is phenomenal. It's tricky, you know, very tricky. And the drivers all said that it was like the best track they've ever been on, you know, and they've been to Nürburgring and all the tracks that we always hold dear, right? Just a challenging track, you know, not super long compared to Le Mans or Nürburgring, but just got everything in it. The element of danger is there, ever present, I would call it. Yeah. And the fans are great. They know a lot. The officials are very Australian, and they like Australians to win. That's all I'm going to say about our late race penalty.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't think they wanted a bunch of rookies to come in and win the race. But we licked our wounds a little bit, but we're okay. We had a good time. It was a great experience. As I said, the track is one that everyone should visit and every driver should drive around if they possibly can. So, yeah. And the bats are massive. Absolutely incredibly large.
Those were huge.
Yeah, they fall out of the trees and fall on people. They had to shut the park down just so people would stop the bat attacks, basically.
It's like
so that's out in the wilderness a bit. Bathurst is about 3 hours west of Sydney. And so, yeah, it's a bit out there in the wild. So you hear all kinds of noises all the time, and you don't know where they're coming from half the time. So did see my wallabies and my kangaroos and all that stuff. And then, spent a couple of days in Sydney, which is an amazing city, by the way. I love that place.
Yeah, I noticed that. It was like watching your social media. It was a travel log. You went all in. I mean, you went on walkabout at that point.
Yeah, one day I walked 13 miles around the city.
Wow.
Yeah, kept going, and it's got everything. It's got a deep city area, business city. It's got a little suburbia in there, and then you just go like 20 minutes on a ferry, and you're out on a big beach. And people are surfing. It's clearly got everything, and it's clean. So it's a really good all round, got everything for everyone kind of city too. So highly recommend Sydney. This was a message from your Australian tourist board.
They should make you an honorary Australian.
They should. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just moved there, you know.
Except that you don't say no the right way. It's nar.
Yeah. I don't say the F word enough either, apparently.
Yeah. Right.
We got a lot of F words from the stewards at the racetrack. I'm like, that's not usual. F off. We're not giving him a penalty. F off.
Yeah.
It was funny. They were brash to the point, which actually I do appreciate, even though I didn't like all the conclusions they came to. But anyway, yeah.
Right. Well, you're back safe in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Indeed.
And raring to go, because this weekend is the season opener for Formula One. But quick programming.
So quick, didn't it?
It did. It really came quick. But quick programming note for you folks that the races, the first two, FP1 and 2 are on Thursday, FP3 and qualifying on Friday, and the race is on Saturday.
Hello.
It's a byproduct of racing in the Middle East, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, at least
So
my
don't
Sunday
get caught
open
out.
for mowing the lawn. Yeah, definitely don't get caught out. Yeah.
Yeah, because most people think, hey.
Oh, by the
new
way,
season.
welcome back, and I'm glad you're back. Get well, please.
Oh, yeah. So, nobody cares. But I took a detour. I was in hospital for all last week. So anyway, I'm back. I'm playing injured, but I'm in the saddle and rip roaring to go. I did manage in my convalescing time to make it all the way through DTS, Drive Survive. So I've seen that whole thing. So there's that.
Did you get enough Danica?
I wasn't too much Danica. I posted something. Actually, for the context and what they wanted her to speak about, I think she did fine. Yeah, she did fine. It wasn't like she was trying to. I mean, she's got racing creds, but I mean,
I bristle more at the staged conversations with Christian Horner. It's really? Is that what you guys are talking about right now? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And JB looking at her.
Yeah, and the kids, like they're at the horses and they're, which one's Max Verstappen? It's like,
yeah.
I just want to throw up a little bit at that point.
Oh. Yes. But it was good. Claire Williams, great to see her on the series. From a team principal perspective, that's not currently involved, but certainly has a lot of sage wisdom to share. And she did a great job. And a lot of people were asking, well, I wonder how they're going to make Drive Survive exciting on such a year of complete and utter domination. Well, they did it very well. They just ignored Red Bull. They didn't talk about Red Bull.
As everyone said, without Red Bull, without Red Bull, it would have been the most exciting season ever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in there biting my nails over Alpine, and meanwhile, Red Bull are beating everyone like rugs at spring cleaning, and they don't even really talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's how they address that. So, which, to me, if I'm Red Bull, I'm like, well, hell, could you at least throw me a bone here and say it's unprecedented, They didn't say anything about it, but on the flip side, as a fan, it was great to see all the other team stories.
Right.
Up and down the paddock, which is
But with Red Bull, Sergio, I think was a major story through the whole year.
Major story, and they focused a lot on Daniel Ricciardo.
Yes, they did.
You and I love Dan; he's a great guy, but I don't know, there's a lot of Daniel Ricciardo in there. Could have used a little more Joe Guan Yu.
Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, so I made it through that. But tonight, I thought we would start off talking about the cars, a little testing talk, and then we're going to jump neck deep into a season preview, share our thoughts on that. So let's start off. So the cars were launched, and I thought it'd be fun to rank the liveries. All right?
Ooh, rank the liveries. Okay.
Yes, rank the liveries. So if I had to rank the liveries for this year's cars,
Yeah.
My list may look like this starting from top to bottom.
Okay.
I did like the Aston Martin. It looks good.
Mm-hmm.
It really looks good. My second one is Visa Cash App Red Bull or VCARB or RB.
Even though you hate the name, you like the design. Yeah, I do like the livery on that one for sure.
Yeah, the livery on that looks really good.
The name's just crap.
Because I was on a bit of a excuse me, I was a bit of a rant about, I'm kind of done with the matte thing. I'm done with the bare carbon fiber with just a couple, splashes of color. I'm kind of done with that. I'm ready to go back to high gloss, total painted cars, vibrant colors. They're easier to see and identify. So that's why I liked the V-Carb quite a bit. After that, I think the Mercedes, as always, looks really good. I thought the Williams looked really good.
That's
a lot of black.
5 for sure. Yeah.
But it looks good. Then Red Bull, the Red Bulls always look good. Not a lot of changes there. Ferrari, I got it down on the list. I felt like the Ferrari looked a little busy to me.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like a little bit add-on. Let's add some more stripes here and do this little add-on stuff. A little less cohesive,
Get the
let's say.
pinstripe guy. Tell him to come back. We want more.
Yeah, it's just not. I just want more, Like, I saw this car down at AutoZone, and this guy had done this amazing job. Let's just try to do that one.
Right. And it's kind of like, I don't know, could we add more stripes or let's just stripe it up a little bit, see what it looks like. I don't know. It's just kind of busy. Yeah. Then I had McLaren, not a bunch of changes there. Then I had Haas. Then I had Alpine because I'm still really sore the fact that a French team seems to not be able to find the French blue paint at Home Depot.
Right.
I mean, make those suckers French racing blue, right?
Yeah.
I know they're corporate colors and all that stuff, whatever. And then finally I had Sauber. I thought that was just a carbon fiber car with a couple,
Sauber stinks.
Green stripes.
Actually,
what?
That looks like they saved a lot of money on the livery designer. I think the Chat AI designed that car.
Yeah, Chat GPT.
Yeah, GPT.
Create a Formula One car design using black and green, but not too much green. And then we'll put these greens. It almost looked like painter's tape, green painter's tape on there,
Yeah.
A little
I would say
weird.
that's my least favorite for sure.
All right. Enough of that. Who was your favorite?
Okay. I would say the AlphaTauri, whatever it was. I don't want to even say that name, but yes, that car. I think that's my favorite. A bit more of a change from previous, and I think everything was done right. Yeah, it's very cool looking.
Cool.
And least favorite, obviously, the Stake, whatever it is.
Steak
also a bad
F1.
name. Mm-hmm.
Now they're in trouble here. There's some EU regulations over gambling. So who knows? Then
they're going to change it to the Steak
F1
and have Longhorn steaks on the side, and just
put an E in there.
Yeah, put an E in there. Yeah, just kind of like what was it when Marlboro went away and they came up with all the different variations to try and pretend.
That was Benson and Hedges. And they had Buzzing Hornets and
there you go.
Jordan.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah.
That's what
Steak and ice.
That was Jordan back in the day. Yeah, that would be good. Steak, STEAK. And then they could put a roux on the side and a bloomin' onion and, play it up. Why not?
Yeah, give it hell. Yeah.
Yeah, why not? All right. There was some testing last week while I was in hospital.
I saw.
Yeah, so the testing was in Bahrain over 3 days last week. Some interesting results. The big question of who is the quickest is always diluted, but the saying that it's testing, you can't tell anything due to different programs, sandbagging, fuel loads, tire compounds, aero suspension testing, and all of that is true. Is very true.
Right.
But we always say every year that statement is mostly true. In large part, but for us at home, it is true. But But for the teams, trust me on this one, they do know what's going on. The teams know how to test. They know how the other teams are testing. They know what's going on. If a car is light on or kind of loose on turn in, and the teams notice that. If it's wiggling a lot under throttle, the teams notice that. That's an issue that the teams know how to fix. But if the car is still wiggling on throttle after 3 days, they're thinking, I got a little issues over there, right? That tells the story, right? So the teams watch everything, including their car and everyone else's. They do know that.
And they have spies out there keeping tabs on things too.
They
not
do.
Not just observing on the TV, but they're really got people making sure they're keeping an eye on what do they think the fuel load was, and they can take photos of the car leaving pit lane, and they definitely are up to date on everyone's downforce
and
stuff.
They're looking at weight transfer loads as they braking zones, corner turn in. They're looking at all of this on throttle performance. They look at all that. So everything they want to know about their car during testing, they're also looking for other cars, right?
So, I mean, to a degree, but you can get lost in the minutia there, you know.
No, they're just making notes.
Yeah. I mean, they want to see which car's working well to see if they can steal whatever their concept is to some degree. But I mean, what good does it do if this car says it's faster unless you can glean some of that technology off of it, right? So I also got to think, Paul, that the drivers could probably feel the aero wash from following other cars and know, you know, if one is disturbing you more than others. I mean, I think the drivers are probably the best receptor for information on what the other cars are doing. They know if it brakes well, if it's got good straight line speed, if the driver, you know, if they're following the car ahead, they can see if he's working hard or not. And they're very much a good barometer for that as well. Another thing that people kind of forget is it's not a Bahrain test. It's a F1 preseason test. So sometimes the teams are out there, as we do when we go testing, just because we're at a track, we're not ideally looking to set the car up and have it dialed in for that track. We're trying different things to see how the car reacts, and maybe using certain corners on that track that can be applied to other tracks and corners down the line in the calendar. So not only, you know, it's not all about lap time, because sometimes you have to compromise a little bit on the ultimate lap time for the test track. When you're testing for other parts down the road, because there's no other testing. This is where they have to glean all their information and get their little copybook for adjustments and where maybe direction for the future for their development as well.
Right. And I would imagine, Paul, you're going through those testing programs is, you know, well, I mean, even simple things like track evolution starts to impact that. You know, as the track gets rubbered in and evolves, hotter, cooler tracks, those kind of things all play a factor.
Oh, that's a big point in everything, quite honestly.
Yeah. So that's all part of it. That being said, for me, I always tend to, you know, being at home, not being at track, I tend to look for a couple of things to me that I think are interesting. I think, you know, the fast lap is always interesting. And I think for me, the total laps completed, because for me at home, those two numbers kind of represent a baseline of what might be anticipated. Ultimately, the total laps completed is a big issue regarding reliability. And so it lets you know, unless a team purposely doesn't have a long run program, kind of tells you if people are having issues, they're not able to run, their brake issues, fuel pump issues, those kind of things. These are niggles that they got to work out, but you know, it could point to other reliability issues. While Ferrari set the fastest time, it was Haas that set the most laps. And that's one of the big key issues for me. Another issue,
they didn't have any development parts, so they didn't have to stop for anything. Should we come in and stop?
Out of the box is what we got.
We got nothing to try here, folks. Right. Let's just keep pounding around and make the most out of this package. Yeah. Should we try the other underfloor? No, we don't have another underfloor. That's what we got. Do you want to try the other front wing? No, that's it. That's what you got right there. Don't break it, because that's what you got. You know, I was watching I was thinking, for me as a Ferrari fan, I was sitting there watching. I was keen to look at their long run pace. Yeah.
and their tires and their tire wear over long run pace and their pace over the long run to tell me if they have solved some of that tire degradation and tire wear over long run. To me, it looked like they did. But that's it's a person sitting on a couch at home looking. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Yeah. I mean, Haas had the worst stint performance out of everyone the whole year. So, yeah, maybe it was better for them to keep doing long runs and try and solve that problem because, they put in a few good qualifying performances in the year, but they could never do anything with the race pace and they just went backwards. So,
which is really
good point.
Could be argued with Ferrari, right? They had one lap pace for sure last year.
Yeah.
It's just the long run. They just chew the rears off. And so I was very keen to see if they solved that. So as I mentioned, Ferrari led the top. They had Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc leading 1-2 on total fastest lap over all 3 days. You had George Russell, Joe Guan Yu, who probably was running on fumes or memories to get that time. Perez there, Verstappen, Tsunoda. Yeah, it's down at the very back. Certainly is Haas, Kevin Magnussen, although Hülkenberg was further up. But total laps ran, just to give you an idea, Haas ran 439 laps, Ferrari 416, Red Bull 390, Aston Martin 378, along with Sauber or Stake with 378. VCARB or RB ran 366, Mercedes 361, Alpine 334, McLaren 327. McLaren did have some niggles and issues they were addressing during the testing. And then you had Williams at 298. They also had some issues.
Right. So that is a telltale for issues between those two teams for sure. The lap count.
Yeah. And I may talk a little bit if I can remember when we get to Williams. I'll talk about that a little bit. So, okay, let's jump into the season preview, shall we?
Seriously, Todd.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Seriously.
Let's start off. Well, let's start off with McLaren. You've got McLaren, no driver change. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri. After 9 races into the 2023 season, McLaren finally delivered an actual 2023 competitive car. And it must be said, and I'm not understating this, they made the absolute most of that car. They clawed their way all the way back up to 4th in the Constructors' Championship. I think it was a Herculean effort by anyone's measure last year. Super excited for them and what they achieved. On what they did. Well, they didn't have as many laps during testing as they may have wanted due to those issues. It's possible that they may have carried last year's momentum with them into 2024. If you remember, last year came out of the box and coming out of testing, everyone knew McLaren was in trouble. Everyone knew.
Yeah.
And even Zach.
They weren't even hiding it either. Yeah.
No, they weren't. Zach came out and said, we've got an issue. It's a shit box. And it's going to be until mid-season before we solve it. And they did. That's to their credit.
Yeah, which is remarkable, really.
It's amazing. You and I talked about it mid-year, right? We talked about, what it takes to turn a season and a car around mid-season like that is massive.
Yeah. It was amazing how quickly they addressed and found the problem, because sometimes you can chase things you're not even sure, but they literally found the problem before even the car turned a wheel. But they couldn't turn that boat around at that point, and were already ongoing into big major development change in the car. So I'd say there was so many impressive points to that first half of the season for them.
Yeah, for sure. They've shuffled the team management around a little bit, have a new wind tunnel. So that's good. They were able to use that and got a new contract with Lando. That should give them a little peace of mind. And in my mind, Paul, I do think they're one of the best driver pairings on the grid. I think Oscar Piastri is the real deal, and not that that's any revelation to anyone. Everyone knows he's an incredible driver, but I do believe that both of them really do represent a 1-2 threat there. And speaking of that, Paul, kind of give us your impression. What does each driver need to focus on this year? And do you see any friction, harmony between them from a driver perspective? Just share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, first off, I think just for the season, I'm more excited about the inter-team battles and even the team-to-team battles at this point. I think that it's going to be very spicy and very exciting to see who comes up on top between all of them, really, and who can get closer to each other. But this one, they've got youth and speed on their side, right? Norris has experience for sure, but he's still got a lot of upside and a lot of time left in his career. So hopefully he McLaren can give him a weapon that can actually start winning races. Else, contracts, whatever. We've seen contracts get torn up pretty quickly if things aren't going right. So he needs McLaren to bring him a car that he can win races. He's overdue for a race win. He's very eager, and I think he'd be pretty despondent if he didn't come up with a race win this year. I think no matter what the contract is, I think that has to happen for him, for him to stay involved in the team. I mean, he's obviously a spearhead in the team. He's been there for many years, which sometimes can, you can get a little complacent. But I think he's a little angry, that Daniel Ricciardo got that race win ahead of him, and he had a bunch of second places. I think he's kind of uncomfortable being the elder statesman in the team, not much elder. And Piastri is kind of a real irritating part for him, actually, because Norris, he's kind of still that youthful Formula One, young up-and-coming driver, so to speak, but he's been here a few years, but still pictured as that way. And yet this other kid comes in and is a near match
on
and
pace.
has beaten him, on pace at some point. So he's really got to choose what he is, I suppose. He's obviously matured over the years.
He has,
but he has to, if he's going to be the team leader, he needs to up that game again. We've seen him, go from the TikTok or whatever Twitch boy to this to that, but now he needs to do a Rosberg and kind of put everything that is his natural tendency, so to speak, when he relaxes, put that away and attack like he's Ayrton Senna. He really needs to take everything, burn the candle at both ends with data, and just every session is going to be, the session where he proves himself. It's going to be tough on him. It'll be very draining, but that's absolutely what he has to do to keep ahead of Piastri. Piastri's got a lot of youth and he's got a lot, the expectations aren't as high for him. So he doesn't have a lot of weight on his shoulders. I think Norris does. So Piastri is a little bit freer to explore and maybe make some mistakes, lay it out there a little bit. But I haven't seen them really being cohesive pairing, as in buddy, and I think that's more to do with Piastri than Norris. I think
agree.
Norris would have been happy to be a joker with him, but Piastri's actually brought a lot more seriousness to the driver pairing, which I think is better for Norris.
I was just going to say that he came all business, right? He was all business, very serious minded, and what you're saying is Lando's got to be all business now.
Yeah, he has to be all business. Yeah. I mean, look at the whole turmoil around Piastri and who's going to drive for and this and that.
Right. That's
driven by Piastri wanting absolutely his best option, and that's exactly what he's going to do. I mean, that's what world champions want, right? They don't necessarily make friends, but they do put them in the position to win championships, and that's exactly why Piastri ended up at McLaren. So Lando is fully capable of being a champion too, but he's got to take it a little more seriously. As I said, it's not like he's a goofball, but it really is. We have to see serious Lando every session at this point.
Yeah, this could be a real test for him. Let's talk about Mercedes, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, having finally ditched the zero side pod concept. The team have an all new car for 2024. The biggest thing is not only how competitive the car is, but the elephant in the room is that Lewis Hamilton is leaving. for Ferrari next year. And this will change the dynamic within the team for sure. Expect to see George get all of the strategy calls. And while they certainly want Lewis there to perform and score points and podiums or wins, whatever he can do, all of the car's future development over the year will be towards George's liking, not Lewis's. We can't ignore the fact that this is a brand new car, whereas most other teams have evolved their cars. And this could be a really good thing, or it could really be a not so good thing, depending on if they nailed it, right? If they got it right. And if they got it right, this could be all of a sudden a pretty brutal weapon in Mercedes' hands. I also think the timetable of their silly season now has moved radically forward. This will be lingering over the team, as well as who's going to be in the other seat. That will be constantly hanging over them, and as well as continuing to get poached as they have the last couple of seasons. But I think that's some of those dynamics. It comes down to this all-new car. Toto had enough. They ditched the whole concept before. This is a ground-up new car. Could be very, very interesting to see how well they do. But from a driver perspective, Paul, you've got Lewis on the way out. That's probably the best news George heard in the last 12 months. We don't know who will replace him, but at this point, this season alone, it'll be an interesting dynamic to see what happens here. You know, Lewis, with all of his talk of Mercedes, my family, I want to be there, then boom, first shot, he executes the exit clause, right? Mercedes didn't offer him the lifetime membership award, $100 million a year for being Lewis Hamilton, an Instagram account as an ambassador, right? That's what he wanted. That's what Ferrari gave him. So is there any love lost? I would imagine Lewis won't be invited to a lot of the technical briefings and those kind of things. Or any. But from a driver perspective now, George, by virtue of Lewis's decision, has clearly got his foot on the neck of that team. He's got to make the most of that, of course. Lewis probably still has a lot to prove. I don't know if he will there, or if he'll phone it in because he's a short timer. It doesn't seem like Lewis's nature. So how do you see this driver dynamic? What do they focus on this year with that dynamic, or, you know, living in the penumbra of that dynamic going on, and coupled with a brand new car?
It's going to be, double whammy there. The new car, where they have to understand all the technology that was enveloped in the car, with a driver who they don't want to tell any of the technology to. I think for Lewis' standpoint, he has to come out swinging. We've seen in the past, unless he had, you know, a massive advantage, which he did at certain parts, certain seasons, he comes out a little slow. And I think that would be in his worst interest. Because I think he can keep the team behind him if he's in the hunt. But if he takes, 3 races to warm up and George starts pounding out some points and starts, taking a lead in the championship over him, I think the team it's just going to be natural that they just migrate to George, because George is the future. I think the history with Lewis, he can hold on to a lot of support because of everything he's brought to the team and the success they've all had together. But I think it's going to be a shock for him. He's had all the support and all the info, and he led the team in various ways, and he's just not going to be there. Not going to have that opportunity anymore. So it's going to be like nearly a new team, so to speak, for him. And certainly the way they treat him has to be different. It's in there, they just can't do everything the same. But that's why it's so important for him to take those first 3 races while it's still, some love. I mean, there's a lot of love in the team for him, but you know what I'm saying? Where it hasn't quite sunk in that Lewis is leaving, because 6 months down the road, everyone's going to be very, very cognizant that Lewis is leaving. And so I think he's going to have an adjustment mentally that the team isn't going to be 100% Lewis. But he, in turn, he has to, really make it so they don't have an option but to keep supporting him.
Yeah, it's a great point. He doesn't want to go into this year being set out to pasture by Mercedes. And the only way to avoid that is to beat George these first handful of races and lead the points.
Right.
And then that kind of puts the team in the position to having to really kind of get behind him, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're against him. I think they all want success. They want to have race wins, but it's a natural migration when you know your driver is leaving. That, well, okay, yeah, and I think for Lewis, I think he needed a challenge. I think staying at one team. I think as he's aged, you need to remotivate, and I think it was this. Yeah. I think he saw this as a way to reignite him. And as you said, Ferrari were nearly the only team that could possibly, apart from Mercedes, could take on what he wanted to do after Formula One. So, and he's always been a Ferrari fan. So, I mean, I think he's excited about his new thing, but I think he would love to go to Ferrari as a world champion. Don't think it's going to happen, but he certainly wants to go back there. Still showing he's on the top of his game, right? Right. For George, life has been made very easy for him. He's Lewis is disappearing. He's the obvious team number one, and there's not anyone that seems like going to jump in that new number two spot that's really going to threaten him instantly. From what I'm hearing of who they're thinking of, so he really has time on his hands, and he's going to revel in the fact that he's going to be given all the information that Lewis is now not given. I'm sure there was some questionable times where he thought, well, what do I have to do to get support around here? We heard it from Toto on the radios. Sometimes it felt like, George did okay. It's like now George is doing brilliant, So George just needs to keep doing what he's doing and make the most of the situation and the extra support that he's going to get technically from the team, understand the car, be able to understand it more than Lewis can, because Lewis isn't going to get all the information, and make the most of it for results. Yeah.
Good. Well, we talked about Ferrari. That's where Lewis is going. Let's talk about Ferrari. You got Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz. Ferrari had pace last year, but it was usually over one lap. As I mentioned earlier, when long runs came into play, they suffered from rear tire wear and stability, and no amount of development during that year seemed to cure it. They brought it, and they did bring out a lot of development last year, and they just could not get on top of what they were struggling with. So the big question is, have they solved that? That's why I mentioned in testing, I was watching that really closely. I was hoping that they had solved that. Time will tell. This year, if testing is to be believed, the car looked tight on turn-in, I thought. On the corners, I thought it moved well, it rotated well. Long run simulations showed good tire wear that I could tell, and the pace was there, having set the fastest laps. So, it's difficult to know. We won't know until Q3 in Bahrain, but I think it bodes well if they're not chewing the tires off the rear of the car. Carlos, similar to Lewis, Carlos knows he's out in 2025. So this year will be all about Charles. And like George, the car will be developed around Charles going forward this year, over the year. And, how that happens. And I think same rules apply. As you mentioned, if Carlos wants to change that, he's got to beat George and lead the championship and then retain that full support. Also, this year, this is Fred's car. We'll see if the team can raise itself to the occasion, coming off being buoyed by that 10% stock bump they got from the announcement of Lewis. Ferrari got a 10% stock bump. They will need to get their strategy down, though. That was one of their Achilles heel last year and years before. And Charles, as you and I've talked about, Charles needs to avoid those unforced errors that he sometimes has.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
From a driver perspective, walk us through it.
Yeah, I think it's a little different from the Lewis situation because Carlos didn't choose to leave. So from the team support, I think people will actually be eager to help Carlos. He's a likable guy. He does have performance in him. He has had results for the team. It just depends on when or how they know what Carlos is going to do. Because, basically he's auditioning for the next place in his life, right?
Yeah.
Could he go Mercedes? He could. Then everything's
Yeah.
going to get shut down at that point, right? But for the time being, I think he's got an easier road to hoe from the very beginning, and I'm sure he is out to prove that they picked the wrong guy to leave the team.
Yeah.
They're close enough where it's not like a foregone conclusion Charles Leclerc is the best driver. I mean, I personally think he's a little bit better, but Carlos has really showed signs of being very fast, before.
And aware. He's got great racecraft,
Yeah, he's got smarts on him, right? And he knows that that Charles' biggest thorn in the side is those little mistakes.
Right.
So I think both of them have had mistakes in the past. So I think if they can hone that in, I think the Ferrari is a Grand Prix winner from the testing and everything. So there's a lot of hope and motivation there that they're going to have a car that can actually win races. Not every time. It won't be dominant like Red Bull, but I think they're going to have their moments. And both of them need to figure out when those moments are going to come and give it everything they've got. They get along well, so I don't see a lot of turmoil in there. As I said, a little sympathy for Carlos for leaving, but this is probably going to be the more tamer of the inter-team rivalries, I would say.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was thinking about that too, watching testing, thinking how well Ferrari may or may not do. And I thought, man, if they come out and they, maybe they're not over the balance of a season quite fast enough to beat Red Bull, but they are thereabouts, and maybe, nicking a race here or there, and all of that stuff. I thought, man, the one thing Lewis Hamilton has proven to be exceptional at is when to leave a team and go to the team that's on the rise,
Right. Yes.
Everybody thought he was crazy to leave McLaren. And I thought, no, I think it's right. He's going to Mercedes, and it happened at the perfect time. And I'm just wondering if that isn't maybe a Ferrari Lewis scenario. It would be interesting to see if that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about Red Bull, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez. After 2023, there is certainly a notion that the team really just needs to evolve their car. It's crazy. That car was so dominant. But that's not actually what they did. This year's car is a significant design change with broad shoulders and, dare I say, almost a nod to the zero pod concept that Mercedes failed to capitalize on in previous years. And that's surprising a bit, given that they had significantly less wind tunnel time due to that penalty of overspinning in 2022. So they didn't have a lot of wind tunnel time, and yet they made some pretty significant chassis and aerodynamic changes for this new car. Initial testing would suggest that they are still the team to beat, but it may be a matter of learning what the real gap to the competition is, in actuality. And the other question is will they have solved their Singapore performance deficit? Because they were miserable at a track like Singapore. And that'll be interesting to see if they do.
Or do they care?
Or do they care? Right. Is that a throwaway?
Yeah, right.
It's potentially Sergio's last year, and it's all up to him to deliver. He left a lot of points on the table in 2023. For Max, I think he looks as motivated as ever, and that's always dangerous. And so I think, it's all there to play for Red Bull. I think car looks aggressive, made some serious changes, which or design philosophy changes, which should be interesting to see. I will say the whole Christian Horner investigation thing is starting to reach a point where people are starting to pile on him. You got Ford coming out twice publicly saying,
right,
where's the transparency, FIA? This is horrible. You got, Formula One. Oh, this needs to be resolved. You got team bosses weighing in. It's starting to reach critical mass a little bit. And that probably is an issue for that team going forward. Anyway, especially when you think about the Ford thing, Paul, I mean, if Ford gets mad here and doesn't want any blowback on their brand, that impacts their 2026 program pretty significantly,
Right. They got to start chasing.
It's a big deal. So watch this space. But from a driver perspective, Paul, how do you see this playing out with Sergio, what he's got to do, what Max got to do going forward?
Yeah. First of all, if we strip down the cars, I think the Red Bull's kind of ugly. I don't like that. I mean, knew he's a genius, obviously, and knows what he's doing, and he wouldn't do it for any other reason than it actually works really well because he's a big guy on aesthetics. Just look at our hypercar, beautiful stuff, right? So
pretty cars are fast cars.
Pretty guy, yeah. So it'll still be a pretty car because it's gonna be fast, but it's not the prettiest.
Yeah.
But
Max said,
obviously,
I don't care what it looks like as long as it's fast.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And Max, what does he have to change? Absolutely nothing. He just has to keep his motivation up, and that doesn't seem to wane at all. Honestly, he loves winning, just like Schumacher did. Doesn't matter if it's your 20th win in a row. He's just as happy, which is it's part of why he is where he is and how he's doing. Right?
You think he's the kind of guy? He strikes me as the kind of personality that his motivation isn't waning, and the moment it does, or whatever, he'll just be gone.
Yeah,
he'll just go do something else. He strikes me as that kind of guy.
Yeah, probably. So obviously the team's going to stay. The structure is going to be the same. They don't want to change a thing. They're on a roll, and there's nothing that would be a benefit to try and turn anything upside down, except the concept of the car, right? Where they don't want to be caught standing, and Red Bull rarely are caught standing. So Max is good. Sergio, however, he has a lot of work to do, and I'm not sure he proved in testing that he really fixed anything, so to speak. If the car's designed for Max, and Max likes a really pointy car, and Sergio doesn't, then he's always going to be on an uphill swing, right? It's always going to be difficult for him. And, there's only so much if the car's designed a certain way that you can actually change it to tame it down a little bit without taming the lap time down, which I think is kind of what happens. They tame the car down for Sergio to be actually drive it without, spinning off every corner, but that ultimately takes the lap time away because the car was designed to work that way. So I don't see a lot changing for Sergio. I think certainly he needs to, if he eliminates some mistakes, he would have had a lot more points on the board. But ultimately, I think the pace is not going to be enough to hold him over for another season. I think there's too many drivers out there, younger drivers, that Red Bull could just poach from anywhere. They can pick whoever the hell they want to be Max Verstappen's teammate, right? Anyone not in the top 4 teams. So Sergio, don't know what he can do to change it. I think he's in a tough place because of Max's driving style and how they don't meet. So, but that's what he's got to do, and that's the only choice he has to do is to solidify it.
Yep. Let's see. Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll. Aston started strong in 2023 with podiums, but they lost the development war and slid backwards mid-season. That's not the end of the world. I mean, yes, on surface, that kind of was a bummer, no doubt about it. But then I got to thinking about Aston Martin in aggregate, and I thought, it's not the end of the world. I mean, if you consider how far this team has come in just a few years, it's really impressive. They got their new factory. That's a good addition. Their wind tunnel is not up and running yet, but they do have a new factory. The car, I think, looks to be an evolution. They said it was a major evolution of last year's car. It has... Oh gosh, it does have a push rod. This car, is using push rod. I think Ferrari had push rods, and a few of them, had push rods. While the driver lineup is the same, and Lance left a lot of points on the table last year, and Fernando is a bit of a question mark too. How motivated is he to stay? I can only assume that Lawrence doesn't care if Lance leaves points on the table if he scores none or 100. I don't maybe Lawrence doesn't care. It's his son. I get it. It's not what you want for a team that's trying to get millions out of prize money, but maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Right.
If it did, I'd have somebody else in that seat. And Fernando's comments, though, I thought was interesting after testing. They were, hey, what do you think? Last year he had podiums. He's like, he wasn't too positive after testing. So let's see how that works out. But from a driver perspective, Paul, you got Fernando, you got Lance. Fernando last year seemed to be every bit on his game. How do you see this year playing out?
Yeah, I think Alonso is more motivated to do well than ever before right now because of the other open seats on the grid.
Mm-hmm. There will be a lot of open seats in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, can he win another world championship? Probably not, but because I don't know how he could get himself in that position where he'd be in the right car at the right time and the number one driver. But he wants more race wins. I know that.
Yeah.
He does, but it's like, what is his long range plan versus a short range plan? And I don't know what that is because, he's a wily guy. And once again, he's a guy that hasn't been afraid to jump teams, even though he may have done it at the wrong time. But there's two seats there that he could possibly get into, the Mercedes seat and the Red Bull seat. And if he shows he's super competitive still, I think he'd have to have his name on the list. And so everything that he's going to do with Aston Martin right now is to either, bring the Aston Martin team further up the grid, which is a good thing for him, or it's putting himself on a list of, a short list for other teams who can give him race wins if Aston Martin don't make that progression into a race-winning team, which is tough to do at this point. The teams are pretty tight at the top, right? And Red Bulls, when Red Bull take 3/4 of the wins, there's very few options, to luck into a win or to grab a win. So I think he's going to be, Alonso, once again, he's a guy that just stays motivated. He's super competitive, doesn't give it up. So I think he's going to be pushing just as hard as he ever did to get that team results either for his own good or for the team and maybe his own good for whatever he wants to do in the future.
Right.
Now, Lance, I just don't know what the setup is in that team. I mean, does Lance the guy that has to make that decision rather than Lawrence or anyone else?
Yeah, I don't know.
The motivation factor, obviously he was not happy last year. I mean, Alonso, I'm sure he was happy for the team and his dad and the success that the car had, but because he wasn't really adding to that success very well, I'm sure that was very frustrating. And it's a matter of, is he still motivated? That should be your highest motivating factor. But he seems sometimes a little distracted by not being fully, I want to be the most successful Formula driver I could ever be. And he's obviously a decent driver, and on a good day when he is fully focused, he's actually doing quite well. But once, kind of like Norris, it's like you got to throw it all out there this year, else you may as well just walk away because you can't go at it, 50%, 70%, 80%, even 90% into a Formula One season with effort and willingness to give everything up to be the best driver you can be and develop your car the best it can be, give up the ski trips, etc. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I don't know Lance. I'm sure he's a good guy, and maybe if I knew him, I'd find out that he's incredibly motivated and very competitive. But when I was watching Drive Survive and he was driving with broken hand and he was in a lot of pain and all that, and he made a comment, he says, I just didn't want to let my dad down. I just, didn't want to let me down. I thought, dude, that is the wrong reason to be in that car.
Yeah. You don't
want to let your dad down. Meanwhile, you've got Charles Leclerc, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Piquet. These guys would rip your eyes out of your skull to win a race and championships. there's a difference. You know what I'm saying? There's just a big, big difference about why they're in that car. And, Joe Guan Yu would do just, he'd probably eat glass to keep his seat in Formula One,
Yeah.
And Lance says, I just don't want to let my dad down. Well, you can do that playing, field hockey. You can.
Right.
I don't know. It just struck me as odd. I don't want to read too much into it or overplay it or be a jerk about it, but yeah, I get your point. Is the motivation there to maximize points every single weekend? Because I can tell you that the 40-something next to you, it is for him.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And he's won more shit than you ever will, and he's still there doing it,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, and on the outside looking in, I just don't see that. Now, like I said, if I knew Lance and spent time with him, maybe I'd be wrong. Maybe he is. He's just, maybe he's an introverted guy and he doesn't wear his heart on his
certainly
sleeve,
uncomfortable in front of the camera or dealing with media. So it's hard to represent exactly who he is behind the scenes, but we don't know, right? So
we don't know.
What we can do is see what we can see. Yeah.
All we can see is sit back and judge him like hell.
Yeah.
From our couch.
Very judgy.
Way to go, Lance. I would have done this. So anyway, Steak F1. Steak, the bloomin' onion.
Yeah.
Outback team.
Alice Springs chicken. Yeah.
That's right. Nothing more dangerous than a wounded mosquito. Okay, Valtteri Bottas, Joe Guan Yu. This team just refuses to call itself Sauber, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Really.
And I would so much prefer it to be called Sauber.
Me too. I mean, what are you ashamed of? Peter Sauber is a hell of a guy,
Yeah.
Just call it Sauber. So after losing Alfa Romeo, they turned up, a Steak F1. Now, a couple of interesting things about the team here. We all know that Audi's invested. They're buying the team, taking over 2026 in the Audi operation. Although I was reading a few articles and saying, well, maybe Audi's, getting cold feet. I don't know. But they did hire James Key. The team took a shot at making an all-new car at the last, the last 2 years have been a real challenge for them, right? So they made an all-new car, very similar to what Mercedes did. Now, that's a big move for them, big investment. It could pay dividends, but I would say that coming out of testing, it looked like they're going to be a mid-pack team. Unless they're sandbagging something. What's slightly interesting is, to me, Paul, Andreas Seidel has been there a while now, and yet their performance hasn't really done anything.
No.
Not like, I don't see him having the impact that he had on McLaren. Does that make sense?
Right.
When he got to McLaren, there was the stuff going on at Steak F1 and Sauber. It hasn't happened, and like you said, it very easily could be resources. I kind of feel like he's more focused on 2026 and Audi. Would be my hunch. But you got Valtteri and Joe Guan Yu. From my perspective, on the driver's perspective, these guys got to be doing everything they possibly can to try to hang on and be the Audi driver in 2026. I don't see that happening for either of them. But for 2024, Paul, what's your perspective on the drivers?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's tough to get motivated when you, as you say, you're in a mid-pack car, and very rarely do they get in the top 10 and you're like, oh, look, there they are. And then all of a sudden they disappear again during the race. So very tough to get results in this car. And I actually thought the Audiness would start really getting into it now.
Me too.
Right? I thought by this time, as you say, he's been there for 2 years now, I guess, since he left McLaren. That a lot of this stuff you would start to see the progression. I get that until the Audi name is on there, Audi, maybe not giving 100%. They may be doing stuff behind the scenes that will give them the best chance when they do launch the car. You know, engine, all that kind of stuff, especially with the cost cap. Take some of that cost cap from this year. Don't really spend it on this car. Spend it on what we're doing next time. Think about Williams. right? They want to develop their whole new headquarters and get new wind tunnels, get new machines and all this kind of stuff, but they just can't do it because they're held below the cost cap. Well, if you don't spend all your money, right, and then you put a lot of it to futures, that would be in Audi's best interest, because they don't really have a lot to gain by Stake F1 doing well. Do they care? I'm not sure.
It's not their name on it.
No, it's not their name on it. So they're best to focus on when their name is on there. Then the stuff is going to get serious. So, as you said, Bottas may be a guy that could maybe hang on just because of experience, but still, percentage is probably pretty low. So both these guys don't have a lot of upside other than just for their own self-worth. Maybe Valtteri could go IndyCar racing. Maybe Zhou could too. I don't know, but I don't see a long time in Formula One for either one. So this is probably the least interesting inter-team battle of the whole lot.
Right.
Because no one, even if they do well, it's not going to be that well, and no one's really going to take notice, right?
Yeah.
So
true. Let's talk about Alpine. Yeah.
They're like, oh,
I know. It's kind of sad, and it's kind of. Oh well. Alpine, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon. Despite a bad start in 2023, the team did manage to basically turn that season around. And they did sell in process. They sold a portion of the team to an investment group with some Hollywood celebrities, and they turned their season around a bit. But that was after sacking Otmar and Alan Permain. The new boss, Fami, he comes in. He's not a grizzled team principal veteran, so time will tell how he does with this team. He's an interesting character.
Did he used to go to school with Finbar?
I don't know. That's a good question. Because they might have just brought Finbar back.
Yeah, they should have just brought Finbar.
Yeah, they should have. Why not? The Bruno Fami guy is a bit of an interesting character if you watch Drive to Survive. He's all very French and all very interesting. But yeah, you'll see more.
Yeah, I haven't seen that part of it yet.
It's pretty funny, especially when he shows up the first team boss interview or whatever. Christian comes out and says, so you're the new team boss? Because okay. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Kid at school, did they start kicking him and stuff? Yeah, roughing him
exactly. Up. Right,
dunking his head in the toilet.
Yeah, give him a wedgie. The reality is, as a works team, they should be battling for wins or podiums by now. But miscues, driver conflicts, reliability issues, inter-team battles, firings of bosses. There's just been a lot of chaos. It's just plagued them. I think the Drive to Survive Season 6 summed it up best when Christian Horner said, it's Alpine. It's hard to tell what the hell's going on over at Alpine. And I think that's true. I think that's true. Yeah. It's unfortunate because you have two very talented, hungry, very competitive drivers over there, Paul. They're chomping at the bit to win races and get in a better team. How do you see this season from their perspective?
Yeah, I see as you say, they are very talented. They've also got good experience. They're not young guns anymore, but they're youngish, right? So I think this is audition for both of them to get the hell out of there, quite honestly. I get that they may not get along super well, but I don't think that really came to too big an issue during the season. Maybe I expected it to be worse and there'd be more stuff going on, but they kept it to a low ebb, I think. Doesn't mean it's always going to remain that way. But, I just think both these guys, they got to be in it to themselves, because what the hell does go on with Alpine? Is this team ever going to get to the front? I don't think so. I just don't think whatever happens over there, just always they hold themselves back from being successful. So it's great to represent, their home country and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't see a future for either of them getting the success that they really want at this team. So I think they are looking for individual successes when the car is fairly decent, and they need to grab that by the when they can, by the Alonsos, and go for it. And don't worry about the team championship. Don't worry about this, but you be in it for yourself. Do not do teammate stuff or team stuff where you let someone buy and all this. I would fight against that if I either one of them, because
if you were either one of them, Paul, this all boils down to CV or resume development now for each.
Absolutely, you need some shining moments, and do not let the team spirit idea get in the way of that, because you need to go somewhere else. Sadly enough, maybe it's a place for Zhou and Bottas. I don't know.
And Bottas, they could go to Alpine.
Yeah.
Maybe Pierre or Esteban go to Audi. Let's see. Visa Cash App RB, VCarb or RB, as some are calling it. Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, not the lineup I would have had for this year, but the team is using some know-how and parts like engine, suspension, gearbox, etc., from Big Brother team Red Bull. Mm-hmm. Now that's prompted a lot of road ripping. And they have a new management in Peter Bear and Laurent Mekies, who they stole from Ferrari. Got rid of that old curmudgeon Francois. If this year's car, I got to think about this. If this year's car's design, which it does look like it, if this year's car is similar to last year's Red Bull, look for the team to make some serious progress up the grid. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That could happen. However,
and even a little bit of this year's Red Bull on it too, quite honestly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a catch-22, though. If they don't progress, well, it's a very bad year again. That's horrible. Mm-hmm. If they do progress, then the likes of Zach Brown are going to be calling bloody foul on Red Bull for owning two teams again, right? Oh, you're just, it's collusion, right? It's going to be
go buy your own second team then. Oh, sorry, you won't let another team in.
Yeah, right. You won't let another team in, Zach. So I think Zach was one of the few that actually was pro and ready coming in.
Yeah, he probably was, because they have dealings together, right? Anyway.
Yeah, they're indie buddies. They have dealings together. So I think Zach was a pro. Anyway, how do you see the drivers here? It's interesting. Daniel Ricciardo. I am still of the mindset, and I wish Dan would call me and disavow me of this, but I'm still of the mindset that I think when the cars changed to the hybrids and brake-by-wire and all that in 2014, he's never been the same Dan.
Right.
And I think he struggled all along with this regulations. I hope this year, because he wants desperately to do well this year to take Sergio's place next year. That's what he wants.
I'm sure. And that's what everyone keeps mentioning.
And that's what Yuki wants, right? So what do you think here? If it was me, I'd have Liam Lawson in that other seat instead of Yuki, because I think Liam, remember me talking about tearing the eyes out of your skull? Liam's that guy. Very much Oscar Piastri-ish. And he's not that far away. He's New Zealander, right?
Yeah.
So that's who I would have. But anyway, talk us through
because of all that fighting with the bats. They're just.
Oh yeah, exactly. You got bats. I had to do with Peter Jackson, the Lord of the Ring idiots over here. So Yeah. So how do you see the drivers pairing there?
Yeah, well, I mean, Daniel had some spikes in performance there, didn't he, last year? So, I mean, it was really unfortunate that, his debut began, then he breaks his hand, and it's kind of took 3 steps back, and it was a little tough to make a big splash for him at that point because of that incident. But he finish? Qualify third at Monza? I can't remember where it was, but he had a couple of really good runs that outshone Yuki for sure.
Shouldn't he this year come in and pretty much put Yuki over in the weeds?
Oh, he's got to. Yeah, if he can't put Yuki in the weeds, then the Red Bull aren't even going to touch him, right? Yeah, there's still too many options. And I agree. Liam Lawson I'm not a big fan of Yuki, so there you go. But I think Daniel has, a resurgence. Hopefully he can get his head around these cars. I think you're right. Maybe there isn't there is some. You look at the dates of the new cars versus his downside. Although he did go to Alpine, so that's kind of like sitting in the parking lot basically,
right?
Waiting for the time to change. But so Daniel's got a lot to do. I think that the evolution of the car and the tighter knit with Red Bull is all positive for him. So he doesn't have an excuse and probably doesn't need one. I think he's going to get some good results, actually. I think Daniel knows exactly what he needs to do, and he's more than willing to put in the effort and everything. Now, Yuki's another matter. What can Yuki do? Well, we've complained about Yuki for seasons now about his temperament and how he approaches things. You can say, oh well, it's he learned how to swear when he came to the UK and everything. Yeah, but he's heard enough. He's had enough feedback, and I'm sure the team has given him enough feedback to say, just stop the hell, just stop it. Be a professional, be a positive in the team. Don't be a negative. Don't scream like a baby, and get on with the program. He can do well, but he's no supreme Formula One driver. Right. He's I don't know. I don't think there's much he can do because I don't think his talent's high enough to actually do what he would need to do to remain there. Maybe there's another reason he's there with the Red Bull organization. Maybe there's a marketing angle there or something like
with
that.
Honda.
But But that may change soon, right? If the Ford program comes in, if it comes in. So
I'm with you. I feel like there are other drivers that have been in the Red Bull Junior program that were there less.
Yeah, they kicked out better drivers than Yuki.
They've kicked out better drivers than Yuki is. Yeah, that's my point. You said it much better than I did. Let's see. Excuse me.
Speaking of,
still under the weather a little. All right. Good grief. Williams Racing, Alex Albon, Logan Sargent. James Vowles and Alex Albon, I would argue, led a little of a revolution last year, giving Williams some bright hope for the future, a good mid-season development and driving from Alex, a great leadership from James, comes in, resets the table. Takes a long look, gets things kind of moving in the right direction. I can't praise James enough for the work he's done with that team. And really, Alex and the driving he did last year, I think was just, if anything, warranted a ride at a better team last year did for Alex. And we'll see this year too. The key is, can they sustain the momentum they had last year and make another step forward in 2024. Unfortunately, James seemed to have walked back some of that optimism after initial testing. And James is pretty blunt, pretty upfront. He doesn't smoke screen you on stuff. He doesn't, we're hoping for the best. And, he was pretty blunt. Look, I think we've got a big uphill way to go. So he was pretty blunt. He felt not as optimistic after initial testing. But to be honest, though, Paul, I think he's always said that 2023, 24, those are years that he felt were infrastructure and institutional development for this team. And really, it was kind of 25, 26, mainly the target for him to be a much improved Williams. And so it's hard to be too hard on him. But from a driver pairing, Paul, how do you see this year for both these drivers?
All right. Well, let me just speak to James Vowles.
Talk to Williams,
Yeah. So obviously there was some low-hanging fruit there at Williams when he first arrived. Some simplistic things he could impose that were just probably, just standard issue from the Mercedes team he was at and an easy fix. Right. So he was able to make, it's diminishing gains, right, on certain things. He can do organizational things and change that and but he can't change who he has designing the car and how the evolution of the car can change substantially. So I think he just made the most of the package that he had. He's certainly smartened things up and put things and got a lot out of it. For the second, but we got to remember it's only his second year, and he was kind of thrown in that at the end, right? I mean, he's a new team principal. He may not even be making all the right decisions right now in the next car, but
as a rookie,
but he's a smart guy.
Yeah.
As a rookie, and he will. I absolutely think he's going to be terrific, but there's just you don't know what you don't know, and you have to go through a certain amount of learning to know which direction the thing is, and so I think it's not surprising that maybe the Williams didn't come out and was also now in a top 5 position. I don't think it was reasonable to think that. He was very low key when he came on and was like, we're not really going to shoot for points. Well, they scored the points on the first weekend, but I think this is a bit more realistic. That maybe, they don't have the car. He recognizes that. Doesn't mean they're not going to have a decent car on some of the races, but I think the Williams team is evolving in a positive side, but there's just so much you can do, so much time, and you still need the experience as a team principal to guide your team in the right direction.
Yeah.
So Alex Albon, I think he's terrific, right? He's done a great job, considering what a beatdown he got from Red Bull, sitting out a year, then coming back in, and he's a good guy, but he's a very serious race car driver. And when you see him on the track, he doesn't hold prisoners for anything, and he maximizes the car out there, which the Mercedes and the Red Bulls of the world should be paying note to. So he just needs to solidify that, right? He's not going to have a great car every weekend. And as I've always said, a new driver needs to have a couple of moments. Well, he's kind of still in that position because he's driving for Williams in a lowly team that aren't really going to give him a car to be successful every weekend. So he's just going to have to maximize that because he has, the potential of having some very good options for a future. Williams isn't, he's not going to be a Williams man for too long, I don't think.
Right.
I can't imagine. Williams won't move fast enough for his career, really. But he's certainly helping that team carry on and become more successful than it has over the past few years.
Right.
Logan, I thought he came out pretty good at the beginning of the year. He definitely had a low spot, a lot of learning. You hear him in the interviews. He learned a lot that first season of what it actually takes to be a Formula One driver. He's not got God's given talent to Formula One, but I think he's a decent driver who could do a good job and be a better backup from Albon than he was last year. And I think that's exactly what he needs to do. Right? Same thing. When Albon has a good car, you need to be there or thereabouts, close to him. Don't make silly mistakes. He also is a bit accident prone also. But maybe because he was out of his depth and trying too hard. Right. So he needs to use that year of experience to build on and make less mistakes, but also he needs to get on the button to be around in Formula One any longer than this year.
Right. And then finally, we got Haas, Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg. Well, the one thing they don't have is they don't have Gunther around to push around anymore.
The swear jar is empty.
Yeah, the swear jar is totally empty now. They've got a new team principal, new hope. They did run more laps than anyone during testing, which is a good sign for reliability. However, they weren't particularly quick, and most likely they will be keeping the seat warm at the back end of the grid. Their biggest gremlin last year was tire wear, of course. So if they get on top of that, perhaps they can heave themselves forward. I'd say that the driver stability for me, Paul, is the one bonus this team has. And having two drivers that are seasoned veterans that know what the hell's going on, there's no change there. They'll have that consistency. I think that's a bonus for this team where they're at right now. They just need to build a good car. Ferrari came out with that new suspension. I'm sure they're trying to shoehorn that push rod into their chassis. I doubt it was probably originally going down that path. Maybe it was, but so that'll be a bit of a challenge. That's Ferrari's deal. And So they'll have some challenges. I can see Haas, if Gene thought getting rid of Gunther was the best move, moving a different team principle, shake things up, and try to get a little modicum of success this year, I think he's going to be disappointed again. It takes more than just firing Gunther or just parting ways, not renewing a contract with Gunther to turn a season around and a team around. So, tough.
Yeah, it's tough for everybody there. I think if Gene sees that as the pivotal point, and that's why they haven't been successful. Seriously wrong, right? You need more financial input on the team. You need some more radical changes. You need some young blood in there, so to speak. It seems like the old man's team, quite honestly, along with the driver pairing. Those guys are good drivers, and they're not the problem, but they're also not the fix. So,
right.
they're going to take the car where it can be, but the car just needs to be better. So for them, I think motivation's got to be tough.
Agreed.
Apart from the fact that you get to be a Grand Prix driver still, both of them were out and seemed like they were out of Formula One, right? Kevin was over here. Hülkenberg was wherever he was. And they got a second or third chance, maybe even in Formula One. I think they're just kind of living that riding that wave for as long as it goes, and then they'll move on to something else. But they don't have a position to take in another team up the grid.
No.
They're not going to be looked at. So this is a tough one for them. Hopefully their car can not go backwards in the races, and they can scrape some points and just take those experiences and those results when you can get them, but they're going to be few and far between.
Yeah. So Haas's goal is to be in the top 10 in Constructors' Championship.
Yeah. If they're not going to let Andretti in, I'd so like to see Andretti just buy the Haas team and do something different with it, because it's just
I know.
It's treading water for too long.
I don't know what the relationship between Gene and Michael is, but it'd be better for Andretti to come in and put some serious money in that team and make a go of it from an American perspective, because what's going on now is unfortunate. All right. Well, that's what we think about all the teams and drivers. Let us know what you think about all the teams and drivers. You can do that by going over to theparkforme.com, share your opinion, just do it to Corman Civility. As always, a huge, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. I tend to post personal stuff and more stuff over at our Patreon page, just for those that support us. And I just want to tell each and every one of you, thank you so much for your well wishes this past week. It really meant a lot to me that you guys reached out and were concerned. So thank you so much for your support, your kind words, your well wishes. Really do appreciate it. Very grateful for your friendship. You can be a Patreon supporter or support us. Just go to the website again. It says support us. You can click on there and be a Patreon supporter. Also, Patreon supporters do get access, except for today, because we're recording a little earlier than we normally would. But you get access to join our podcast and be part of our audience live and interact with us and chat with us during the cast. So that's another perk of being a Patreon supporter. So please consider that. And Paul, it's awesome to have you back stateside. Tell everyone what is next for Heart of Racing.
Well, Heart of Racing is actually racing this next weekend also in Qatar. It's the WEC season opener.
That's right. That's the WEC season opener, right? Yeah.
WEC season opener, and there was some trouble getting cars and parts to Qatar, so they actually started the pre-season testing was today, and they came out looking pretty good, actually. So that's positive. I can't be at every single race, but so I'm going to go to some of the WEC races, but Qatar wasn't on the cards. So
is he in there?
Ian is there. Yeah, he did a pretty damn good job too. So testing's going well there. So hopefully hit the ground running. And obviously Le Mans is the main goal, but being part of a world championship is pretty exciting, as well as being part of the IMSA and all the SRO stuff as well. So that's next. And then after that, it's Sebring. And that's our next IMSA race. Yep. Awesome. Lick our wounds on the 27 car from the Daytona, but we had a good finish for the 23. So that's in a good place too. So.
Good.
Yeah. Exciting.
Excellent. All right, I can't wait. All right, folks, until next time when we come back to do this all over again, this is Todd saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over. It's not what I feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a